Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to the live stream tonight. I'm so glad you guys are here and hanging out with me. Tonight's gonna be a little different. We are actually starting a new project. So I hope you guys are excited. I'm very pumped to be working on a fresh new thing with you guys. And so before we get into tonight, let me talk a little bit about some announcements for you guys that are watching. And to do that, let me switch over to my other screen here. So Pinterest is something that I've been working on a little bit behind the scenes. If you've been watching, you know that I've been using the Blender Unleashed Pinterest, and now that we're kind of talking about the Orange Guild these days, I am transitioning over to a new account for the Orange Guild. So if you've been following this month's project, you might be interested to know that under the boards, you can go check out the current project with concepts and designs that are here. You can also check out all of the work in progress renders and screenshots that I've been sharing on Instagram. So these are all here, and what's really cool is you can walk through and see all the way back to the beginning of the modeling process, where we were, and then step through and see how all the textures were updated and added all the way up to the current work in progress render. So I will continue to add those as I finish out the project. At this point, I am working on a new course for you guys that is going to be all about 3D illustration with this project. And so you're not going to see any more live streams about this project specifically, but we need to go in and add in the main feature here for the illustration, which is going to be the amulets, which is the centerpiece. And that's going to be only for people that are in the course. So if you're a member of the Orange Guild already, you're going to get that as part of the membership, obviously. And for people that would like to become a member, it's really easy. All you have to do is head on over to theorangeguild.com. Updated this a little bit now. There's a little bit about me, and basically you can click any of these links. It'll take you to the training section and show you what is involved in what courses we currently have available. If you'd like to become a member, head over to the Guild membership, and you'll be able to see all the courses that are involved here once you join. And it's basically going to give you access to everything that we offer. So the new course will go up live in here if you guys are interested in that. It's going to be maybe 3 hours long. And what's interesting about the course is that it's going to cover a lot of stuff that we haven't covered in the live streams. So I'm going to do a complete breakdown of the amulets, which is the object that we have not modeled. It's the only object we haven't modeled yet. So if we head to the concepts, you can see a concept of the amulets on the, oops, sorry about that. See a concept of that on the concept art here. So that's the object we're going to be modeling, a little bit more advanced than some of these other objects in the scene, and it's going to require some special attention. Here's the concept art for it. So very, very cool. And can't wait to see everybody inside the course for this. So let's talk about what we're doing tonight. New project. So I hope you guys are pumped, because I'm pumped. So I'm going to share a little bit about where we're headed and talk about what we're getting into. I know you may have seen the thumbnail talking about dragons. And so let me kind of switch back over to webcam here and talk a little bit about what we're doing. So you may not know this, but I partner with a film studio that I office out of where I live. And so we work closely together on projects, and we have collaborated on a project that is going to allow me to do the visual effects and 3D models for a story that we're telling. It's a short film. And so they handle all of the production side of shooting the film, and I was able to be a part of that. We shot that in Vegas earlier in April. And so I'm going to share a little bit of the footage while I am talking to you guys. You guys get a chance to see what this looks like. This is some drone footage that we shot while we were in the dunes in Vegas. And so let me play this for you guys so you can see it. So I can't tell you a whole lot about the project right now. I got permission to kind of share a little bit about the shot here. This is a drone shot of our main character kind of coming up behind him on some of the dunes. And basically all I can tell you is that we're creating this dragon creature for this project. So what we're going to be doing tonight is jumping into Photoshop and talking about how to design the dragon, what the design specs are going to be based on the meeting that we had and we all talked about. And so you can see that we've got really awesome cinematic footage to use. And at some point down in the future, I will be doing a course on creature design that may stem from a little bit of what we talk about in this live stream. And I will also be doing a full course just on this short film that breaks down how to do visual effects inside of Blender. So if you guys are interested in that sort of thing, this is going to be an awesome project for you guys. And I hope that you enjoy it. So if you are into that sort of thing, leave me a comment. Let me know if you're excited about that. And I would love to hear what you think about the direction that we're headed with this sort of thing tonight. But as you can see, I'm really excited. This took 2 or 3 days to shoot out in the desert. It was very rough filming this. And I actually got really, really sick and was only able to shoot on the first day. So hats off to the production crew for going back out there for 2 or 3 days and getting all of this footage. And this is just one shot of about 40 or 50 that we got for the story. So I can't wait to share more. Lots coming up later about that. But this is kind of something to kind of whet your appetite about this project. So we got a question in the chat. Looks like Lorian is asking, you will not be doing the Amulet live stream. No, but since you are a member of the Orange Guild, you will be able to get that in your membership. So as soon as I get that course finished, I'll upload that and you will see that inside the guilds automatically and have full access to that course. Okay, so let's jump into Photoshop and see where we're at tonight. I'm gonna go back to my main section for Pinterest, and I've got a secret board that I've been working on for reference for this dragon, which I will share a little bit as we go. So Lorian's asking, did I use the drone sitting behind you on the mantelpiece? So I think we used the DJI Mavic Air for this particular shoot. That drone was too big to take with us to Vegas because of the limitations for the carry-on. And so we took the smaller drone. But as you can see, we got some really sweet footage just using the cheaper drone. So it's really, really cool. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do is gonna kind of show you what I did earlier today and kind of where I got, and then I'm going to step through what the project kind of is for the dragon and what we're going to do tonight to kind of get this into place. So these are just some basic thumbnails that I did in Photoshop this afternoon, and all I was trying to do is give myself a lot of options for silhouettes as far as the dragon's head and things like that go. And so no particular direction, just wanted to give myself a little bit of a brainstorming session. That led me to creating several more. And so you can see I've got about 20 options here for different dragon designs. And it doesn't take a lot of information, as you can tell, to kind of get the point across. But I just wanted to figure out you know, some ideas for what I could do, what direction I could take this. And then what I did was I brought in my buddies from the film studio and we had a production meeting and talked about what direction we thought the story needed to go for the final edit and what the creature kind of needed to look like. So we talked about, you know, whether it should have wings and how the body should be shaped, the mechanics and the anatomy. And we talked about whether it should have spikes and the skin texture and all that kind of stuff. And collaborating with people on this type of project is something that's really, really fun. So if you haven't done that yet, I would highly suggest you get some friends together and kind of work together on a project because it can be a lot of fun. So from this, we kind of narrowed down 3 options out of this whole list. So these were the 3 that everybody felt were kind of strongest and went towards the story we were going for. And so out of these 3, we're gonna start talking about these tonight and some possibilities for some of the details on the inside of this or how we might be able to do some line art from this. But let me talk a little bit about the brief for the dragons tonight, and we're going to see kind of what we're going to be designing. So let me turn this on and let me move this down real fast. Okay. So if we look in the upper left-hand corner over here, you can see that We're creating the dragon. It's going to be sort of desert themed because it's, obviously in Vegas in the desert where we shot it. And so we're going to be doing like a sand based dragon. And so after all the discussion, we decided on these main points to make sure we emphasize in the design. And so typically when you're starting a bigger project like this, you want to make sure you get everybody on the same page. And so because, I'm the one that's creating this in 3D, before I just jump in and start going nuts, I want to make sure that we've talked about it and we're all on the same page. And so what I'm going to do tonight is make sure that we have some visuals so that when I go back to the next meeting, I can say, okay, based on what you guys described, here are the options. Here's some things that I think could make this design work based on the parameters that you've given me. And now let's talk about what you like, what you don't like, and how we need to fix this. So the things that we decided on were we wanted the dragon to have wings and that they would kind of be tucked in against the side of the body. And you'll see why as we kind of get further into this list. But we also wanted to give it some different kinds of designs than you would normally see with the dragon. And so we talked about having centipede style legs somewhere on the body that kind of wrap and tuck inside of the underbelly like a rib cage would. If you picture that in a human torso, they're going to fold in and wrap inside. And so those will kind of expand and come out when it's in the sand, and then they'll tuck in when it is maybe flying through the air and things like that. And so we have some other ideas for how it can move when it's on the sand. It sort of swims like it has swims with its legs like a snake would be in the desert. Its breath is hot enough to melt sand instantly into glass. And so the idea for the discussion here was that we want the dragon to be able to also go into the sand and burrow kind of like a worm. And so we're going to have it kind of be able to fly through the air when it's in one modality. And then we're also going to give it the ability to kind of melt the sand and fly into the sand and then go underneath like a worm or a snake or something like that. And so it's going to be a really formidable type of opponent. And as you might be able to guess, this is going to be our, antagonist in the story. So it's going to be a mean dragon, maybe an evil dragon, and we're going to need to figure out how to make that happen. Since we're talking about it going underneath the sand, we're going to want the nose to be form-fitting to pierce through the ground. So probably not going to have it rounded off. We're going to want it to be kind of sharp and pointy so that it's easier to get through the ground there. And as I mentioned before, it can both fly and swim through. What we're talking about right now is melted sands. And so the idea would be that the dragon is able to breathe on the sand, turn it into something like molten glass so that it's liquid and it can swim through it, and then it will re-solidify as it emerges from underneath the sand. And so that may be a little confusing, but that's exactly why we're doing what we're doing tonight. So we can nail this down and everybody can be on the same page. Okay, so let's take a look at our three top silhouette designs here and look at some options for how we can start to move towards a unified vision for this design tonight. So starting with our silhouette, since we've already defined the outside edges of our shapes here for the dragon heads, we can either choose to start adding value and painting on top of these using something like a clipping layer, or we could even just lower the opacity and draw back on top of these with line drawings. And so it's really up to you guys, kind of what you want to see. If you guys have any opinions in the chat, which direction you want to head, now's the time to let me know if you would rather see line art or possibly me painting black and white values. And I don't mind doing either, but I definitely would love to know what you think about it and what you want to see. So the idea with this list over here is that it narrows down what our options are. And that's good in a lot of ways, because if you sit here with a blank page and you're trying to design something, it can be very, very overwhelming, which I'm sure you guys know. And so what the goal would be for this list is that it gives us something to kind of narrow down what our possibilities are. And that way we're not having to beat our head against the wall. Same thing that writers go through with writer's block. We don't want to have to, figure all of this out without any guide. So this is going to be our guide for what we can do and what we can't do, and everything has to kind of conform to this list over here. So I've got some opinions in the chat. We've got Afix Entertainment says, do values, please. Lorian Davey says, yes, do values. Okay, we're going to do values. So we're going to do a grayscale because working with color is just going to complicate this and make it slow down at this point. So we might as well just stay with black and white. We can always color it later if we need to work this up into a final design. So I'm going to create a new layer, hold Alt, and then left click in between the layers to create a clipping mask. And that basically is going to keep everything inside of these black silhouettes that is right here. So now what I can do is basically just use black and white. If you want, you can drop these on the palette on another layer up here if that helps you. So what you can do is fill this color here and then pull another swatch over, invert that, and that way you can color pick from these two. Or if you're like me, what you might want to do is just hit X on the keyboard over and over again, and it lets you switch between white and black, which is another option there. If you'd like to kind of predefine your grayscale values, one of the things that you can do is jump into the color swatches here and define separate values as you go. And so rather than doing a gradient that has millions of colors in between, what I would prefer to do is pick some of my own values that are going to help me out that I think I might need. And so I'm not going to have tons, I'm just going to have 3 or 4. So we're going to need one right in the middle. So I'm going to grab a big brush, and then I'm going to make a mid-tone gray here. I'm going to want something closer to the bright side. Let me put that over here, and that's actually so close to the background color you can't even see it. So I'm going to brighten this up, or even make it a little darker maybe. And then we want something closer to black on that side. And so now we can just color pick holding Alt to grab any of these colors as we are painting, which will make it a lot easier. And I would really recommend doing this instead of trying to blend smoothly as you're starting to paint, because it will keep things simple for you. So let's merge these palette layers. So this is all by itself over here. I'll label this so I know what it is. Save what we got, and let's get started. Okay, so I talked about creating brushes in a previous live stream. I'm using my own custom brushes. You don't have to do that. Photoshop has a lot of brushes that are come included with the program that you can use. And so just pick one that you like working with. This one's a rough sketch brush that I created. And if we're using it in sort of a bigger format like this, it makes a nice little painterly brush stroke. So let's start with a mid-tone value. And you can see what we're going to get as we paint on this layer here. We're not going to be able to go over the edges. At least we shouldn't be able to go over the edges. Okay. So the reason you're seeing that overlap is because it's not actually just a black and a black layer underneath. I've got, if I solo this so you guys can see what it looks like when I turn this all the way up, you can see that I've actually used some of that other gray color to paint underneath. And so what I'm going to do is let's grab our bottom layer here. I'm going to duplicate that and let's merge that down. So we have a solid layer here. And then I'm going to select a color range, or a, not a color range, but a specific color. That should still work. Let's try this. Pick this gray color in the background, and I want this to be gone. So that's going to select all of that. I'm going to delete it. And now when we turn our background layer back on, we'll just have this black here. So now it should stay on the inside when we paint on top. Okay, let's try this again. Grab our brush, color pick, and now you'll see that it stays inside that silhouette. And let's turn back on our brief. And is there anything here about the head? So we know the nose needs to be sort of more pointed. I'm not going to be super concerned about that until we get into doing more fine detail. But let's just start with some basic paint work to kind of get some ideas flowing, because I know it can be a little intimidating to kind of work on some of this stuff. So we've already got some basic shapes in place. We know that there's some spikes up here, and I'm not really thinking about much right now other than basic form. And so things that are lower to the ground on the underside are going to get a darker value because they're wrapping around. If it's pointed up to the sky, excuse me, if it's pointed up to the sky, you'd want to give it sort of a brighter value. So anything that's on top, this would be just like a basic lighting scheme that we can play with. And so this would be a good way to start things off, is playing with just color picking with Alt. And if you're on the Mac, that'll be Option, and then just kind of designing things as you go. So stay zoomed out as you're doing this. You don't want to zoom super far in and start getting too detailed, because the goal of this is to move quickly and just kind of get some basic ideas down for how this is going to look. And we don't want to slow ourselves down because we haven't decided on a final design yet. So I'm just trying to think of general details right now. Anything that's got some harsh shadows, we can put something that's kind of black underneath, or this darker value, and that will let you kind of transition from light to dark. This kind of makes it feel like these are wrapping around like cylinders. So that's a good little trick there to get these blocked in. And you just basically switch between one color and the next using these predefined values. And so I'm only using 5 values. That's still quite a lot. You can actually do this with just white and black. You don't actually need all of those other values, but it can help depending on what you're doing. So I know I want the eye socket to be maybe somewhere over there. And right now, let's kind of block in what this would look like. It's going to be kind of big. The eyeball might not be, but the socket would be bigger. And so you're going to have around that maybe some folds of skin. And I know this because I've been looking at a lot of reference lately for lizards. And so that's kind of where I'm pulling this information. So I haven't got this all memorized, but you know, it helps to look at reference as you're kind of going through. Afix Entertainment saying, have you ever tried any other programs like Krita? Yes, I have. If you don't have access to Photoshop or the Adobe Suite, I would highly recommend checking out Krita. It is an awesome open source painting app. And GIMP is also a really, really good alternative to Photoshop. But I use Adobe every day for work, so that's kind of what I'm used to. But yeah, those are awesome programs. So let's just imply some detail in here. And to do that, I'm just dotting a little bit, getting some paint strokes in there. On the underside, it's not going to go full black because you have to remember that it's a 3-dimensional shape. So as it wraps back around to the other side, you're going to get some brighter areas that are maybe from the light. And so I'm going to go out to the outside and just have a little bit of that wrapping around to the inside there. And you're going to have a core shadow going down the middle here. So let's kind of get this in place. If you can, stick with bigger brushes. Again, for the same reason we're not zooming in. You don't want to get too focused on details right now. And so here we go. Afix says that they prefer painting in Krita to Photoshop, actually. So that's interesting. I haven't heard anyone say that. I've been using Photoshop for so long and I'm so used to it that I really like it. In fact, they just added a bunch of new features that I was telling my buddies about today, which have really made it enhanced the painting and the sketching workflow, which I can share a little bit tonight as we get into this, because I think they're really, really handy. Anyways, so Yeah. Now we haven't touched white really yet on this because we need to save it for the brightest highlights. And you also have to think about types of material that you're going to be painting onto. So if it doesn't have a lot of shiny specularity on the object, you may not want to use white that much. But I'm just going to use it for the brightest highlights here. And just to indicate, again, a little bit more detail. So anytime there's something that's maybe a little wet, you might want to put it there. But I'm just kind of looking around, seeing what might be pointing up towards the sun if we're outdoors with this object. And then that's the stuff that I'm painting a little bit brighter with these highlights. Lauren's saying, for a movie, the dragon will need to be rigged, right? I'm trying to learn my terminology. Will you be showing us how to do that? Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring that up. Tomorrow, I'm actually going to be jumping into Blender and showing you guys an entire introduction to how to rig a basic character. And so we're going to take like a mannequin or something simple and rig that. And then we're also going to rig something and skin something, which is actually how you take a character that's made out of geometry and attach it to the bones for a rig. And so I'm going to show you a really easy demo for both of those versions. We're not going to be talking about any add-ons. We're not going to do anything fancy. And it's not going to be something that I would recommend you continuing to do that way because it would be dumb to do that since you have a lot of other advanced options once you get into character rigging. But for people that have no idea how to do it, it's going to be a great intro to the terminology, how to get it done quickly in Blender if you've never done it before. And we're going to start talking about what that looks like because we are going to need to rig this dragon as a creature for the film that I'm working on. So let's kind of leave this where it is now, and we'll come back when we need to, if we need to continue with this design. But I'm just indicating a little bit of detail to see what could go and work with this for right now. So now we want to do the same thing to this one. I'm just going to move a little quicker at this point. And again, if you get too small, it's going to be harder to paint fast and fill this up. So let's just keep the brush big and moving. And you only really slow down and stuff when you are towards the end of a design and you're working on rendering it out. So we don't want to go too slow. All right, so we're thinking about big shapes here. We got a cylinder basically all the way up. So the top half is going to get lit sort of like this. These are smaller cylinders, so those are going to get lit kind of like that. These are little spiky skin folds coming off the back. And again, we have a wrap happening around this circular object. So this is a cylinder. Let's see. We went a little too dark too early, so we can't do a core shadow without using black. If I stay with a light touch, maybe we can do that without it looking weird. Let's go around the underside of some of these and paint some shadows. And it's really fun with the silhouettes because your only limitation is the edges. So everything inside is fair game. If you want to add a detail that is a little off the wall, then as long as you can fit it in there, it'll work. And so these edges right here, if we break this up, will change again how this three-dimensional shape sort of reads. And then if we shrink the pen a little bit, we can actually play with some of these shadows down here. So they actually look a little different. So the nostril might go there. Might have the eye do something like this in this one. Forgive me at some point in the evening if I go a little quiet. Sometimes I have to do that when I'm concentrating. So still getting to a point where I'm trying to get better at painting, but it can be kind of difficult sometimes to get all this stuff in here because it's, it's anatomy. It's stuff you got to kind of think about as you go. So anything that's a little too forceful, we'll go back and again, we'll just paint back in with the other color and we'll clean that up. You want to think in graphic shapes as you're doing this. You don't want to think about, cross hatching or doing anything complicated with the shading. It's just about getting really simple black and white reads on all of these pieces of the object. And then once you've accomplished that, shading this, going back in and doing it detailed won't be a problem because you've already got these big kind of details into place. And so you should be good to go. So obviously everything that's brighter here is either it's a form change because it's a value shift, or it's possibly a difference in the texture, which could also indicate a value change there. And so something to kind of be thinking about as you get in here and go. So got a couple of comments in the chats. Afix Entertainment says Photoshop tends to be really heavy. Krita tends to be more light and runs faster. In my opinion, by the way, I might ask a lot of questions. I'm newish into digital painting. Hope you don't mind. No problem at all. That's why I'm here kind of doing this. And so if you got questions, definitely ask me, and I don't mind stopping to answer some questions as we get into this. Also, another comment, these seem to be lit from the top, but also from behind. So a little bit of both, yeah. I'm lighting mostly thinking about the sun over top, but it's not perfect. There's gonna be a little bit of variation as we get in here. And again, that's just because of speed. I'm not taking the time to plot out light and shadow right now, because what's most important is that we're getting a good visual read on the design. And so once we get further into rendering and come on up with a final sketch, I'll probably go back in and do a paint over that is more realistic and takes that lighting into account. But until then, it's not going to be nearly as important to nail that down, because as long as you can see kind of what the idea is with the sketch, then you've really kind of accomplished what you're supposed to accomplish. Okay, so think of this kind of like maybe a mountain landscape, and it's the same basic idea. Anything that is tucked under, a piece of this horn or something is going to get a shadow underneath, and then anything facing more towards the top is going to be a brighter color, and that's just going to basically show some shading there. Hey, the Foot Fan official in the chat says hi, and I'm saying hello to you. Thank you for checking out the live stream tonight. Okay, so we're almost done with this one in terms of the basic sketch here. Let's move on to this other one back here. Let's start with sort of a brighter value in the middle this time. And without thinking about it, we're just gonna scribble in some stuff here to start with. And then we're gonna go back, and this one, I'm just gonna go real fast, and we're gonna see kind of how it looks a little different. You'll start to notice, like Bob Ross, if you've ever watched him on television, maybe from the old shows, we'll call these happy accidents, and it's actually really true. A lot of the design stuff that comes out of working on these, if you're moving quickly, can be accidents. And if you turn them into something intentional, then it can honestly work out quite well, depending on what happens. So don't be afraid to kind of get in here and scribble, and you don't have to share this with anybody. So if you mess up, don't worry about it. All right, so here we're starting with, again, real big forms and not thinking about details at first. We're gonna block in all of that main color before we get to the rest of these shapes. And then we're gonna go back and add those small details in after the fact. So this is a much quicker way to work than trying to think about all the details as you go. And I would recommend this to everybody that's starting off. It's really just deciding how you want to kind of blend everything together as you go. Aphex Entertainment is saying you were saying in a rough sketch that it's better to use preset values than trying to blend. So it depends on the kind of style that you're going for, but in my opinion, if you're starting to thumbnail and do something quick, the point of this is not to design a pretty picture. The point of this is to design something. And so if the whole goal of the project that we're working on tonight is to get to a design that works, then I shouldn't be as concerned about making all of the shading perfect, right? The only reason I'm painting this right now is because I want to be able to show other people that aren't inside my imagination what the details need to look like. And so I get it to a point where they can go, oh, okay, so that's a highlight, that's a shadow. I can kind of tell that maybe this spike comes out of the side of his head and then it wraps under there. And so with all that stuff in place with black and white, you really don't need anything else to show off the idea. And that's enough to have somebody go, yes, I like it, or no, I don't like it. And then at that point, when you've got, yeses from everybody that's involved with the project, you can go back in and decide to work up the final decision to a much higher rendered out level. And this is where you would want to maybe turn the dragon in space, get a 3/4 view, and really take your time doing some line art or painting it up in color or something like that. So we'll get to that point, but probably not tonight, because we're going to have to talk about a lot of the other parts of the design to make sure we get all that finished. But I'm hoping you guys can help me out a little bit with this, because there's a lot of pieces to this this dragon. So hopefully you guys can help me decide what it's going to look like. Okay, so again, only the things that are kind of facing up or out are going to get this highlight that's the brightest. Things that wrap around the underside might get a little bit on the very, very edge. This is what rim lighting would look like. And then you're going to switch to the next brightest value and wrap that around even further, just like this. And I would highly recommend experimenting with this type of shading, because you'll notice that the contrast is really where it sells. So if you want to cut back into a shape, pick a darker color than the color next to it, or a brighter color, and decide how you want that silhouette to read by creating an interesting line. And it will give the impression of detail, which is really what we're going for here. So all of these are going to get a core shadow kind of going through the middle, hinting that they are cylindrical based objects. So here's another example where we can redefine this edge and make it a little bit more interesting. Might bring this darker area up into here, indicate some sort of a tuck inside of that above the upper shape here. And we'll refine that shape a little bit by switching over to the bright value again. And then if we really want to pop this, we can grab the next lightest value and then go over this rim edge with that. And then you just selectively work up to the next and next brightest value to show off those details. So you can see how that really starts to feel like it's popping off the side of that face there. And then obviously once you're done, you can go back with the shadows and kind of darken that in for the darkest areas. So most of this design stuff that we're doing here will change, but I just wanted to give you guys an idea, if you're doing some quick sketches, how to take those from silhouettes into getting some basic ideas down for the project that you're working on. And I do this pretty much these days for every single 3D object that I'm working on before I hop into Blender, because one, I like painting. I think it's a lot of fun, and it's a whole separate side of art than the 3D side of it. So it's fun to work on. And then I also think that it really helps me narrow down the decision-making process before I get into 3D. So I'm not wasting my time on stuff that doesn't need to be worked on. And I think so many people don't have a plan when they get into doing their projects, when they hop into Blender, and they just hope that they're going to shoot from the hip and it's going to work out. And the sad truth is that if you really don't have any idea what you're doing, seldomly does it ever work out for the project to end up the way that you originally envisioned it in your head. And so the more that you can learn how to communicate the vision to others or to yourself before you get going on a project, the more that you are able to dial in the project as you're creating it so that it actually reflects that initial vision. And it helps you kind of gauge if you're heading in the right direction as you're creating stuff. Okay. All right, we're getting close here. Lauren says, I like the horny protuberances on the middle dragon head. So is that on the top maybe? Is that what you're talking about? On that part of it or another part of it? Maybe just all over? I know when I was talking to the guys this afternoon in the production meeting, they were really enthusiastic about the horn idea. So, we want to make it a little different. We don't want to just copy a franchise that already is out there because this is probably going to go on the demo reel for our studio. But we definitely want to be conscious of things that have been successful in the past and maybe decide for ourselves why that's the case. Okay, so this can be tricky because you're, again, purposefully limiting your ability to pick colors, and you're having to try to create shapes out of, just silhouettes that are already there. And it is challenging, but it's also a really good exercise to help you kind of see what you need to see to get designs down quickly. Okay, Lauren says the eyes look scary and realistic in the middle head, so that's good. So eyes are really not too hard to do from a distance. You basically just create any kind of shape you want, and as long as you've got some highlights that pop out, you've got some things that give it some life. So that's a pretty simple little trick to make them look more realistic, is darker values for the pupils or irises, and then pop out the designs a little bit with some highlights there. Okay, so we've got some basic paint-ins done at this point. Once again, we've got our original layer here, the silhouettes, and then we have just the painting on top of that. If you want, you can grab both of these, duplicate them, and then merge them into one layer. So now we just have this. But let's talk about some of these other design aspects and decide what those need to kind of look like. So I'm going to zoom back out at this point from focusing on smaller features, and let's talk about the bigger picture for the entire dragon body. So I'm going to turn this off and turn the palette off, and let's just use black. Okay, so there's a lot of shapes that are involved with the dragon that we could pull from. This one is going to be more snake-like in the way that it is executed. And so what I'm going to do is turn my smoothing up on my sketch brush, and that way I'm going to be able to draw really smooth curvy lines using that. And so what we're going to want is we're going to want the head, to be sort of here, and then we're going to want to be able to snake the rest of the body out from the center of this. And so we need to decide, what that's going to kind of look like. Now, S shapes typically work really, really well with organic things. You got S shapes and you got C shapes, and S shapes, especially with, you know, curvy spines and things like that, will look a lot better if you can kind of nail that down. So we're going to try to find something that kind of gets the overall body shape down, so we know big picture wise where we're headed, and then we're going to try to go from there back into the smaller features and paint those up. So that way we can do a much more detailed drawing here. So don't really care what the details look like on the head here, but I just want to get the scale right so that the rest of the body feels kind of correct. So the neck probably is about like that. It's going to come down, and I'm kind of trying to figure out if we wanted to combine an oriental type of dragon, which if you've seen those, they're just basically huge squiggly lines, and then they have, you know, little bitty feet and legs that come off of them like this, and they have little claws that are kind of like this. So I like that these are a little different in the way that they appear, and on the front, you know, you have these huge sorts of heads that come off, and, you know, big tongues and stuff like that. So these are kind of interesting, and they're very, very different from the European style dragons. But we do know that we have to have wings, which these typically don't have. They're much more like snakes. And so we're going to try to find a happy medium between those two. So I know that I want this to sort of be elongated like this and snake-like. So let's pull out this shape here to be a little longer. I'm just going to erase this real fast. Let's turn our opacity up. Okay. And so we got to figure out kind of how the wings are going to be attached. I know I want them to be, you know, sort of able to tuck in. So if the snake was, or the dragon was kind of in the mode where he was going to be diving through the sand, we would probably want the wings to be tucked in on the side, kind of like this, so that they're form-fitting to the rest of his body. And again, that's not really something that I've seen done a lot with other dragon ideas. So we need to kind of figure out how that is going to work functionally so that we can design it. So tucked in, they would kind of look like this. When they're expanded, we need to decide if it's going to be like a bat wing. We would obviously want several sections, and then we want this to come down. They've got, like any bird, they've got several sections with bones, and then you've got this webbing that sort of connects all of these together like this. And so the structure here can be rigid when it's extended all the way out. And then this all folds because it's sort of like skin in here. So that's typically how the dragon wings are usually done. And then they tuck in and they come up sort of like this and fold on the back of a design. But what do you guys think? Is there something in particular that you guys would like to see? And at this point, this is where I would start pulling up my reference and kind of looking at what else is out here. So these are the type of spikes that we're going to be trying to add somewhere on the head. These are actually all real lizards, and so these aren't dragons in here. These are actual photo references of lizards, and so something like this is more desert-based, which I kind of like. And obviously, when we get into the 3D side of it, we're going to be talking a lot more about how to get scaly textures in place and skin shading and all that kind of stuff. The eyes are also another thing that's kind of important because we can do a reptilian kind of eye that's more a slit, sort of up and down and vertical. Some of these actually have rounded out eyes. This is a basilisk, which has more of a rounded out eye. Some of the crocodiles and things like that have orbs that kind of have an interesting pupil there. And then, of course, I've got some reference of all of these different types of eyes here. So kind of interesting seeing all the variations there. And obviously we want to go for the one that's going to be the most intimidating and the most scary. So these are some other dragon ideas that have been floating around there. I didn't want to pin too many of these because the point is to not copy what's out there, but to come up with something new. And so we're only going to use these as basic ideas for how to remix what's already out there. and we're not going to copy anything that exists. This is some reference for the centipede, which is where the legs are going to come off of the body on the inside. So that's kind of interesting. And then I wanted to find some stuff that kind of came across as like evil. And so we're going to get some ideas about the eyes, possibly from some of this reference. And then, you know, maybe we could give it some more human characteristics in the skull. So it's going to be a little bit different and odd. This is a picture of a cat that looks really, really evil. So I thought that was fun, and we should pin that. But yeah, I also have a note that we do want to add horns on the design here. So we just need to figure out how those are going to be shaped. We don't want those to curl down and under. I think I got a note back from everybody that said that kind of makes it look like a goat. So they don't want that. But yeah, that's what we're going to be looking at. So when we get into doing the wings or something, I would probably look up a lot more reference about bird wings and maybe reptile skin and things like that. But for now, we just kind of need to decide where we're going to put these. And I think somewhere around here is probably okay for the design. And if we extend these, we need to decide how big they're going to be. So from like a top view, if we had the dragon here, and it was about this long, you know, on one side, we would probably want the wingspan to come out to about here. If you're talking about like a human body, your distance from one arm all the way to the other arm is the height of your body vertically. So that's a good reference in terms of how to decide maybe how long and wide these should be to get these proportionally in place. So we can talk about that. I'll undo this and get rid of that. But you know, these are going to come out sort of like this. Get rid of this wing. Okay, decide how that looks. So maybe we have a section there and a section there. There's going to be more of like a bone structure back in here so that it's really rigid and allows the wings to be really strong and powerful. And then, you know, we can come back and tuck those in like this as it flies. And so the other side, you'd want to like mirror this out so that the wing is sort of at the same fold position. And we just indicate that the same idea is happening on this side by drawing the same lines there. And there we go. So fully extended, maybe it's kind of like this. We can make this thicker if we want. I kind of like how skinny this is right here in terms of that silhouette. And this would obviously be a little bit easier to tuck back into the side of the body. So that's kind of an interesting idea there. So some of the other details we need to talk about is we need to figure out the little legs, the centipede legs that are going to be on the body and how those are going to work. We talked about in the meeting how maybe we would have them crisscross and tuck by wrapping around the center of the body, offset from each other. And so I don't know if we're going to have like 100 of them, like a centipede would, but we were going to have, I know we're going to have something that moves kind of in the same way. So let's get some room down here. I'm going to get rid of this. And let's talk about maybe what these would look like with the centipede legs. So if we have a section of the body close up right here, I don't know what the underside is going to look like or what would happen. On a snake, you would, you know, typically have sections that have ribs where the snake sort of flexes the muscles in between and scurries along the ground and slithers. So possibly something like that. In our case, I think what we're going to want to do is if, you know, this is representing the outside and this is sort of the interior of the body, we're going to want some sort of exoskeletal type of thing here where we have joints and then they're offset like this. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing this right now because, again, we're just talking about ideas. But let's talk about how this will work functionally. So if this is going to come across and wrap around the other side, then this one's going to do the same thing. This one's over here. This one's over here. And we also talked about how many joints does this need to have? And the Centipede actually has 2 or 3 or 4 on every single leg. So it's quite a bit more than I actually thought were there. But in our case, we might want to have 1 joint and another joint, and then the last one would be a little shorter, and it would taper out into that. So this would actually, if we start here and there, maybe they taper a little bit more. And so we'd have 1 joint here, another joint here. So joint like this. It's really messy. I'm gonna undo all that. Lauren's saying legs should have a single claw at the end like a spider. Yeah, so I think I agree. The reference definitely has those little spiky things on the end, and so we want to stick to something kind of like that. So they're going to be pointed. But again, we just want to see how this looks and determine 2 things. A, does it look good? Or can we make it look good? And if we can, is it functionally going to work when we are animating this? Because what a lot of people don't think about when they're designing is that they're trying to mimic something that is happening in the real world. And the problem that I've seen on personal projects when I've tried to design stuff that looks good on paper, but then you get into 3D, is that it gets derailed when you are considering how this actually has to move. Because one of the things that looks nice and neat and simple here is the length of these legs. But you have to remember, if we're looking at a sort of top view of this section of the body, this is a cylinder. And so these legs are actually going to need to be starting on the side of the body from opposite sides. And then we're going to have joint number 1. It's going to come across joint number 2, and it's going to tuck in over here with the little claw or whatever. And so we're going to have all these sections, and they're going to be kind of crisscrossing over each other to the other side. And so one of the things that may happen when we start to build this in 3D is if we haven't correctly calculated how long these actually need to be, when we start to animate this, and the first time we either fold these in to the body, or if we rig this with them already unfolded when they're out to the side, it may look weird. So it may look weird, and it may not even move in the right way because it might not be possible to make them move in the right way. And so the idea right now is really awesome, where the whole point is like, let's make a dragon that slithers using these centipede style legs that are in sections. But if we can't make it work in the animation with them all working together and slithering in a way that seems believable on film, then it's not going to work. And so we have to kind of think about that right now and decide what's going to happen. And then obviously later on, even before we get to doing the full model, I'll probably do some animation tests with some of these legs to make sure this is actually going to work on a small scale. So Lorian says the legs need to fold backward as well as inward. So are you saying like we have a joint here and then it goes in and then it tucks in and then the claws like right here, and this is all against like the inside of the body like that? Or like how would that work? Let me know, and I'll try to make the adjustment like you're saying, because I want to make this as realistic as I can. Turn the smoothing down, say 25. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So you're saying instead of doing side by side, we should crisscross like this. Is that right? Or maybe you're saying they should all be, how would that work? From the center, they're going out like this. Is it this one or is it this one? So this is 1 and this is 2. So let me try this one more time. Are you saying they start off on the side, correct? And then we're going to go in and back like this. This would be 3. Oh, okay, I see. So they're not alternating or crisscrossing. That's interesting. So we really liked the idea of the alternating crisscrossing thing. You think there's a way we can kind of make that work? Because we wanted to have a shot where it like he unfolds and it's really kind of frightening on camera when it first gets revealed to the character. So is there a way to make this work with the crisscross, you think, guys? See if I can draw a more detailed version of how this would work. Okay. Okay, so each leg is going to be something kind of like this, and they're pretty translucent and plastic looking on a centipede. But yeah, so let's take this one as an example and see if we can work with this. So Lauren, you let me know if this is kind of going to do what you're talking about. I'm going to shrink this down so we have a copy of it over here. And let's grab this one section. The legs need to be attached opposite each other in pairs. So let me see if we can style this in a way that works. And again, you tell me if you think this is going to be doable. So our original concept was more something like this. So we would just have tons of these, down the middle of the body, like over here. So does this kind of accomplish what you're saying, or do we need to tweak this again? Because I'm having a hard time kind of figuring out what's from just the description and what you're trying to say. So in this case, we would have the other section of the body be something kind of like this. And the idea would be that we have kind of like grooves that are built into the exoskeleton of the underside of the belly, and the arms would kind of like tuck into these cavities when they're not in use, so that it sort of conforms to the cylindrical shape of the rest of the body. So we thought that might be an interesting way to handle the shape here. Tilt each side towards the back of the body. So do we just need to flip this entire section here vertically? Like that? Okay, so you are saying crisscross. All right, let's try this again. Sorry guys, I'm wanting to make sure I kind of get this idea down because it might be something that we can use. So let's grab this one here and make another copy. And then let's tilt this down. So is this a good start? Is that what you're saying? Copy this and go horizontal like that. I think that could work. And if we duplicated these, it would be more like this. Okay, yeah, we got it. All right, that's what you're saying. Yeah, I think that's a really cool looking design, actually. And, you know, we can talk about, you know, practicality of how this all works, but the truth is, if it looks cool, that's half of the battle, because this is entertainment. And after that, we can talk about, you know, what is functional, and ultimately it needs to be a little bit of both. But unless you're designing for something that's actually going to be a real product or something like that, you know, it's one of those things where you just kind of have to pick your battles and decide what's worth focusing your time on. And, you know, for this particular project, it's a fun project. We're doing it with our no budget. It's just our time and money going into it. And so we are doing this just so we can kind of test our skills and learn from it and things like that. So this is going to be tucked under. So I'm just going to quickly kind of erase all this stuff out so that we can just get a really quick visual look for how this is going to look. And then I'm not going to spend any more time on this for right now because we need to move on to some other stuff. But I want to show what this overlap looks like so I can take it back to my guys and kind of show them the idea that we came up with tonight. So I think rather than just going crisscross side to side, this adds a little bit more dynamic, you know, design to this. And so as Lauren is trying to point out, I think it also adds a little bit more functionality to the way this would actually work in the real world. Okay, I think we're good. Almost. I keep looking and I miss something. All right, put it on both sides. See if we don't have anything else left to erase. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Save. Okay, Lauren says, since the dragon needs to swim through the sand and the air, tilting the tucked legs towards the back makes the dragon more aerodynamic. Okay, very cool. Good idea. So the only question that we're going to have to answer as we animate is how do the arms unfold in a way that is not going to get them kind of crisscrossing over each other and being a problem. So all we would need to figure out is there a rotation that needs to happen with the existing arms? So does the arm need to swing out before it comes up? And, you know, that's where you get into all the fun mechanics of how the bones need to move and what you need to do to rig that up. But we can talk about that later as we get into this further design here. So just to kind of finalize the way this is looking, I'm going to go ahead and keep those around, but I'm going to take this layer and move it out here. Let's select everything on this side that we drew, and let's get rid of that. So we kind of have a framework for what this looks like. Okay, so this is going to end up being sort of like my design sheet that I use as a reference for all the ideas. And then we're going to go back to this when it comes time to do the final design as a point of reference for how that needs to be drawn up. So let's do a little bit of organization here. It's really a good idea to start naming things as you go because it's going to start getting very complicated in terms of organization. So all of this stuff, we're going to label this legs. All the hidden layers that I want to keep around are still going to go in that folder. So let's hide that. This stuff I don't need anymore, so we're gonna get rid of this for now. And this layer is gonna be, let's call this body. Okay, so now we can start kind of putting our sheet together in a little bit more of an organized way. Let's take our leg layer and drop it over here. And I like to just kind of clean this up. If you've seen any of my old concept art for other projects, you know that I like to be really kind of anal about labeling and making sure everything's in place correctly, because I want other people to be able to get something from it. Okay. Lauren said it would be cool if the legs open gradually from front to back. Imagine how scary that would look as you start to realize how many legs she has. Yeah, so if we did sort of a ripple effect where there's a wave of legs opening from top to bottom or something like that, or bottom to top, whatever, it'd be freaky. So that's a good idea. Let's make a note about that. So I'm going to use my handwriting fonts that I created. And let's say... So make a little note so we remember to talk about that in the meeting. And if you wanted to, you can go in and kind of shade these a little bit so it's not so confusing to look at. But since we erased all those joints and showed the overlap, it's a little easier to see what's going on now. So what else do we have to talk about? We have, obviously we can talk about the scales and the spikes for the head. Obviously we haven't nailed down the head design, so we need to actually figure that part of it out too. The wings, I don't know if we're gonna need to do anything really spectacular with the wings, because they're not gonna be a huge part of the film. Most of the things that we're doing in the shots are gonna be on the ground. So it will be noticeable from a distance, but I don't think it's gonna be anything too insanely different from this design here. Let's look at our notes over here. So we got the wings, we got the legs we just talked about. We got the idea that the sand is being, he swims across it like a snake. Breath is hot. So one of the ideas we talked about with the breath would be that maybe he doesn't have fire come out of his mouth. Maybe instead it's just really, really hot air. And so when we show that in the effects, maybe it's more like a steam that comes out of his mouth. And so that might be an interesting way to show that. And then let's see. So for the head, we also have to talk about the nose, how we're going to design that. And then, so both of that. So there's not a ton else left to do in terms of big things to figure out here. We're going to need to talk about how to actually make the rest of this sort of look with the tail, length of that, all of that. But for basic designs, I think we're in a good place at this point. So we got about 45 minutes. What do you guys want me to work on? You want me to work on the head design? You want to work on like another part of the body? You want me to draw out the wings? What kind of stuff do you want to see at this point? Lauren says the wings need a claw at the front of each joint and at the tips. So we've got claws on the tips. So what's the claw on the front of each joint? Are you talking about up here, where they actually start to tuck in on the body? And so explain that a little bit more. Maybe we can sketch that out. Lorian wants to see me work on the whole body. So I might be able to do like a 3/4 sketch and see how far we can get with that. Anybody else have any opinions on what you want me to work on? Do we have a consensus? You guys want me to just draw a sketch of the whole dragon? So Lorian's now saying the wings. Do you have a preference? All right, let me know if you got a preference, because we're gonna get going here real quick. Okay, whole body. So let's talk about this a little bit. I don't think you guys have seen me do any sort of 3/4 sketching yet. So this will be interesting. What I'm gonna do, because I would love to keep all of this up so that you guys can see it as we go, is I'm gonna grab a copy of all of this and merge it. Pull this above, turn all that off, and then let's shrink this down here. Okay. Create a new layer. Make sure we have our sketching brush, which I ironically have named Notes instead of Sketch. And then collapse the rest of the stuff. Oh, okay. She's saying the wings need claws. All right. Well, let's draw those in and see if we can get that looking good on a small scale here. So I've got my sketching brush. It's really, really simple. It's just sort of like the other one, tapers a little bit, but it's on a smaller scale here. So not sure what we need to do for the claws. We can kind of do something like this and have those attached. Does that work? Or do you want to do something a little different? I know the ends of these might have some spikes or something. I know typically they do on some of the other dragons that you would see. I don't know if those are tips of bones or actually supposed to be spikes that you would see in other designs, but anyways, I know I've seen them around anyways. So this little stuff here can really add to the silhouette in terms of making it appear different. And so something to kind of pay attention to. The front of each joint and on the tips. Yeah, okay. So there we go. Not sure, we might even do something with the tail. You know, you could create some spiky stuff in terms of skin and plates and all sorts of dinosaur type stuff that's out here to the side. But that'll be for something else we can decide on as we go. Okay, so let's take this idea and let's do it big. So for this, let's go full screen. And let's start real loose. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of refine as I go. So I'm gonna start off really, really sketchy, and then I'm just going to kind of take parts out and add them back in a more detailed way as I figure this out. So let us start with big perspective shapes and get the perspective down here. So I know that I'm going to want to do a 3/4 view. So if you imagine a cube, the way that it's going to be shaped is going to be like this for this angle. And this is the perspective that we're drawing right now. Okay. So what I like to do is start off pretty sketchy, especially if I'm in something like Photoshop where it's really easy to remove the details. And then I can go back later and I can replace things as I go. Now, it obviously depends on how you want to work on this, but I'm going to be using this bottom sketch down here as a reference for how I go. And before I start blocking in details, what I want to do is block in the entire shape of the dragon so that I know it's all going to fit on the page and be, you know, sort of in the right size. So we know we're going to have to create something that sort of curves around. It's going to come down, and all of this is going to be cylindrical like this. It's going to tuck under, and we have to decide kind of pose wise what we're going to do to make this interesting. So it may come back sort of behind and go this way. And we could either have it flare up sort of like this, or we could have it kind of tuck under and, you know, out to the side as far as like that. What do you guys want to do? Remember, we also have to put the wings in somewhere. So you guys have a preference? How do you want the tail to kind of work here? What do you think would work best for this design? this point, we can also really easily adjust things. And so if we want to change the size, move things around, we have all of that we can do right now before we get too far into this. So let me know if you guys have a preference for the tail. Let's talk about where the wings need to be. So it might be somewhere around here. We need to have the joints come out, and you want to be kind of thinking about the anatomy. Obviously with the dragon, you're going to be making this up, but picture this is sort of like a hip bone. And so you're going to have the pelvis sort of coming out with the hip joints on either side. And then from that, you're going to have, these wings coming out like this. And so what you want to do in perspective is you want to have one wing defined kind of the way that it's flaring out to the side. And then you want the other one to kind of mirror that on the other side. So before we nail that down, let's make sure we're happy with that look. Okay, the S shape looks good. We're going to keep that. So we're going to obviously taper this tail all the way down to the end over here. And we want to also think about how this is going to wrap around. And so sometimes if you have a ridge on the tail, it kind of twists, and that adds a little bit more dynamicness to the pose as it warps around. So if you follow the darker line, that's going to be more, how this is twisting as it's heading around the back here and up the side of the spine there. Okay, so we got the wing joints over here somewhere. Let's pull this out. And remember, we're turning this in perspective. So we want to make sure they're coming a little bit towards us instead of just drawing straight out to the side like this. We want them to be a little bit more foreshortened and coming up towards the top. So they're going to flare out a little bit towards the front. So I'll try to get this looking proper. And the way the foreshortening kind of works is you're going to have overlap happening. So rather than do what we did here where it stretches all the way out to the side, we're going to start in the same place, but instead of going all the way out to here, we're going to come to about here. And then we're going to draw like the dip in the structure. And then this is going to be closer towards us or the camera, as you would say. And so then the next joint will be coming out, and it will be even bigger. And then the final joint or the tip of the wing, if it's coming towards us a little bit more, is going to be a lot bigger than the joint down here. Even though in real life, this joint and this joint and this joint and this joint are getting smaller as you're going towards the tip. If you're foreshortening, you want them to get bigger instead of smaller as they're coming towards you, because you got to think about perspective here. And that's honestly what we're concerned about. So instead of doing a straight line, again, you don't want to do that. You want to give the illusion that it's curving, dipping, whatever. And depending on how much it's pointed towards you, you would have these overlap more and more and more. So if it starts off to the side and you've got this going on, and then at a 45, it starts in the same place, and you've got this happening, and it's still stretched out the same distance, it's just turned more towards you. And then when it's turned all the way towards you, you're going to have the base joint here, you're going to have the next joint here, and then you're going to have the next joint here, and then you're going to have the tip, and it's going to be like this. So all of those are going to be stacked one on top of the other, and it's hard to kind of picture this as you're drawing, but this is kind of what you would need to start working on if you're going to start drawing in perspective to make this look correct. And so this is more like what you'd end up with if these were, the dragon wing was turned towards you. That's what I'm trying to show you. Okay, let's get rid of that stuff. Let's see, we got this coming down. We need to just basically block in these shapes. We might have it sort of dipping. Might be a little bit more dynamic to do a roll like that. And so we can flare here, and then this will straighten out more as it gets down to there, like that. And this is going to need to connect back up to the body. So we need to decide how this is going to work. If there's going to be some sort of like thicker webbing or something that is connected there with strands of sinews or, something that connects up back to the body. I'm not really sure what this is going to look like yet, but obviously that would be behind the dragon's side there. So you have the spikes now. And again, you want to keep this kind of loose because you're not trying to draw a final version, you're really just trying to communicate an idea. Some people can't tell until you get it into a perspective version of the drawing what it's supposed to look like. They can't tell from these little sketches. And so again, this is why concept art is kind of around, because if you have a big production team of people that are working on something and you're dealing with people that aren't artists, you'd be surprised how much it takes to kind of communicate an idea to those kind of people, because they can't see it in their heads. So this is sort of the process that I'm kind of talking about at this point, where we are racing back out the areas that we want to refine. So we get to this kind of point where we've blocked in the basic details, and then all these really rough areas, we'll just go back in and we'll erase one little section, and then we'll touch that up, and we'll just keep doing that until the whole thing is refined up until the level that it needs to be refined to. And so this is a great way to kind of stay on one layer, really block in what you need to block in without getting too crazy. It's a simple way to work, so you're not going to get overwhelmed and have to, get too insane about making sure your lines are perfect or any of that stuff. You can just, again, take it a little bit at a time and only focus on what you need to focus on to make this work. Okay, so anything behind this is going to be gone, but we know what that's supposed to look like, so we can remember that. Lorian says she wants the wing more bent at the joints. So when you say bent, do you mean the pose is going to be more bent, or do you mean that you want the in-between sections to dip like lower? Like, what are you saying there? Because we could do something like it starts on the body, it comes off, dips back in towards here, comes back out towards there, and then it's got the spike on the end of it. So is that more like what you were hoping for? Is it more like this little thumbnail sketch up here? Okay, so let's try that because it may look a little bit more natural to do it that way. So I'm going to take all this stuff that's sort of in the middle right here and behind this wing, and let's go ahead and get rid of it so that we've kind of got an easier job drawing the way this is supposed to look. And then let's repose this wing. Okay, so starting with the joint here, let's just get the joints in place first and make sure that that's working, and then we'll go back in and add the details a little bit more. So the first one maybe comes out like this, and then you're saying like just starting to unfold. So let's think about how that would work mechanically. So this would kind of come in, and they would kind of maybe spiral in a little bit, and you get further and further into this section. So how many joints we got? We got 1, 2, 3, and then the fourth is the tip. Okay, so starting like tucked in, coming out maybe. Okay, I see what you're saying. So let's undo some of these, get back to the starting point here. And so let's think about this. How would it be tucked in? Would it tuck up with the joints for the shoulders, or would it tuck back? You think it would tuck back? Start like right here. We can draw through to draw what's behind the body. Okay, I see. So we got the joint coming back over here. The first one's down there. So this, in this case, it's going to go away from us. So we're going to do foreshortening, but it's going to be smaller as we go down. So again, look at how these are shaped. If this is sort of a orthographic perspective where this is all flat, and you can see how these are tapering smaller and smaller, you're going to have to exaggerate that as you paint them going away from you. Again, because you want to show off the change in perspective here. So the claw is only going to be that size, that far back. It's going to be stretched here. These spikes are going to be going more up instead of out, like that. And then we're going to have the bone structure kind of curling under this way. That's going to curl under, and it's going to be really, really skinny right there because this is almost lining up in perspective. So you can kind of see what that's doing there. And I'm going to erase this part of the body. Okay, so we're going to start right about here, and then we're going to come down and up like this maybe. Okay, so Lauren's saying if her wings are back, we can see her slithery body better. So possibly one of the problems we're going to have is the silhouette, and this is a good thing to kind of talk about at this point. The way you're designing the rest of the way the body is working together needs to kind of complement all the sections. And so if we were just to take, let's finish this out so we have the rest of the body back to where it was. But I'm going to draw and kind of show you what I'm trying to say here. So the rest of the slithery body is going to curl around kind of like this, the way we had it before. And let's darken the outline of our dragon's wing over here so we can kind of make sure we see what that looks like. And this is a good thing to kind of show what's in front and what's in back this way. So she's saying make the wings go back and up, which is probably a good idea. So that's what we'll do. But just to give you guys an example of what I'm saying, let's take this entire design right now and let's just check the silhouette. Okay. So I'm going to duplicate this dragon. Let's shrink it down and let's just fill in what this would look like as a silhouette right now. So you'd have the head basically blocked in like this, and then you have the body blocked in, and it's going to be following this sort of curvy direction like this. Okay. The problem is with the wing in its current position, if you fill this in, it's going to get really hard to read what's going on just in silhouette. And the best advice I can give you if you're trying to make a really strong character design, even if this is going to move in animation, is always design a silhouette that is going to stand out and be instantly recognizable as a character. So like, if you can't tell this is a wing just from the black and white read, then we got a problem. And so don't let your design fall into this trap of being hard to understand from a form basis, because if it's going to be sketchy as just a black and white painting where it's hard to see what's going on, it's going to be really, really bad when you get to a point where it is coming out as a silhouette. And it just makes it confusing for someone who's seeing it for the first time rather than having the wing come out, you know, like this, because obviously that's a wing. We don't know what this is. This could just be a mistake, right? And that's obviously not what we want. So let's get rid of this. And I'm gonna fix my size by switching back to that. And let's fix the wing. So we'll select all of this. I need to be on the right layer. Okay. All right, so let's re-drop this all back in here and start here. And we want to go up and back. So once again, I'm just going to block this in and you let me know if this is kind of what you're thinking. So it needs to go up to about here, maybe out, and maybe back where the claw is like there. So is this more like what you had in mind? Something like this? All right, so it's tucking back, but it's not it's not feeling good to me right now. And I think it's because there's not enough dynamic curve. So if we were looking at a top view of the dragon right now, and it was kind of doing something like, you know, this, that was a terrible attempt at drawing that. So if it's coming back more like this with the body, the top view, what the wing is doing right now is just this, and we don't really want that. We want it to be more, if it's coming off the body from the top view, we want it to be more curving, kind of like this. And so again, that's just a foreshortening of the joints. And so if you were to draw this from a front view, again, you would just need to pick a distance for the first two joints here, and then taper this further and further in as you get back towards the tip, like this. Okay, so that's kind of what we need to make this look like. Okay, so how is it gonna look when she's unfolding her wings? So these are fully extended. Talk to me about what it looks like when they're coming off of the body. Because remember, in the design we had talked about, these were kind of tucking in on the body. And so we may need to reposition the body itself into a more S shape that's not coming up so much. So it might need to be more like this. That way we've got some more like wiggle room to play with. And what we would do is, again, we would twist the way this kind of looks like that. All right, so obviously we'll come back and we'll clean up all these curves because they look terrible, but so Laurenstein, I think, bent the other way, bent back at the shoulders and then still down at the joints. Okay, so top view, joint 1, back, and then joint 2 here, and then out to the claw. Is that what we're looking at? Is it unfolding like a zigzag? Is that how this works? I'm not really sure about the anatomy on this. So if they're folded, are they like this? That sounds right. This is where more research comes in to make sure you're getting this right. Down to the claw. So here is the first joint, second joint. Here is the third joint, and the fourth joint is down like that. And this is a top view. Is that what we're looking at? fold it up there. I know that looks confusing, but I gotta know what we're trying to aim for, otherwise I won't be able to make it look right in perspective. We're saying something like this. First flex the shoulders back. Okay, so they're gonna come back like this and like this. All right, and then at the top of these, we're gonna have some sort of spiky thing. And again, we have to remember what's in front here. And then once those are back, remember that the wing comes up. So a little spike at the bottom. That's gonna tuck like this. Okay, so this is the first section. All right, so what happens after this? And then after this, we're probably going to need to move on to something else if I don't get this right. All right, so what's the next several sections doing after she pulls back? Are they still coming out? So I know we're sort of in a V shape here from the top view. What's happening now with these other joints after this? Are these coming out like this? Or what are we doing? So we're doing that. Let's turn up our smoothing again. Let's go up to 30. All right, let me know if I'm getting this right, because I want to make sure that this is kind of working. So this would come more like down here, and we'd have another spike. And that would eventually connect back up to that. Okay, good. Glad we got that down. All right, so now that I know what we're doing, we have two joints on the back of the dragon here. We're going back with these two joints, number 2 on both sides. And then what we're doing is we're curving around and down here, and then we're going to come back in. And so it's like Lorian was saying, these are going to be gathering some wind. Claw tip is coming up towards us. This. Okay. So let's think about how this would need to look to make it look fun. All right. So from this point forward, we need to go back, and then we need to go wide. And then we need to curve back in. And then we need to come around like this. Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. So let's draw the tip more like this, and it would come out more pointing towards us like that. Okay. So little differences in the way that you curve these bone structures can really make a difference. So depending on whether you want to curve in or out can make a really big difference in the dynamicness of the pose. And so strong lines, strong curves going in would indicate that, again, we're wrapping around this way. And so that's kind of what we're looking for here. So we need to pick where the bottom of this is coming in, and then you can make some interesting little decisions for the wings. Sometimes you'll see chunks taken out of the sides if the dragon or whatever's gotten into a fight. You'll have little things missing or whatever, but that's kind of an interesting thing to do. And then we've got a really foreshortened wing sort of coming around here like this. Okay, now we can get going. Okay, so doing this in perspective, you want to mirror this over to the other side. And so again, from a top view here, you can use this as a guide to help you kind of shape this. We already have an indication of how this is going to be going back from the first to the second joint here. And so again, we're going to want to go wide, and I'm going to pretend the dragon's head isn't here. And we're going to go through to about there. And maybe we'll start that joint right around here, and then we will come back around with that spike there. And so it's not going to be quite as foreshortened as the other one was, but it will kind of be in the same pose. Yeah, so that's a good point. If Lorian's saying if the wings are translucent, then we would be able to see the veins inside of them. And that's true, we would. So when we get to doing the detail phase, we would probably want to make sure we have that in there. For now, I'm gonna go ahead and leave that out. So obviously we're gonna get rid of all this if the head is in front, but you wanna make sure that you have that mapped in, or at least you know where it is. So that way when you're going back in and you're drawing the rest of this, you at least know what parts are supposed to be showing. There. So yeah, so you can kind of see we've worked the wing up a little bit more than the rest of the body, and rather than diving into one section and doing it up to a really fine level of detail with a paint over it or something, you want to try to make sure you work up the whole body simultaneously. And so tonight, let me see how much time we have left. We have about 10 minutes. So I'm going to do what I can to try to get the rest of the body quickly blocked in. And let's kind of focus on the head here. So I'm going to erase all of this right here because I know I'm not going to show it. We're going to just kind of improvise what this would look like for now. Thinking about doing maybe some horns or something in the middle of the head here. And so we might do that. We're going to have nostrils kind of on the sides. Those are going to need to have bigger sections kind of coming off of those. All of the head design will probably change as we get further into picking what features we want to keep and what we want to get rid of. But for now, let me just kind of show you how this would work. So if you don't know a lot about perspective, I just did a live stream last Friday on perspective drawing for people that are new to it in Photoshop. And so you can check that out on the channel. If you haven't subscribed, definitely subscribe to the channel, because we are doing 3 live streams a week at this point, and we are starting to work on more and more courses. So a lot of fun stuff coming up, and don't want to miss that. So talked about the front of the face kind of needing to be a little bit more pointed. So we might have the front part of the nose drop down a little bit lower, like this. And we're going to play with the rest of this and figure out structurally what we want to do with the side of the head here. Again, this comes down to silhouette and trying to nail that down to something that kind of works. We're not going to be able to get too much more into the rest of the design tonight, but I want to thank you guys for dropping by and spending some time with me. Hope you guys enjoyed sketching, and as always, anytime I do these sketching evenings, feel free to drop by and sketch with me, and we can talk about anything you want to work on. So we'll have some more spikes coming off around here. Somewhere around here we're going to have some horns, and so we'll want to kind of block those in and figure out what those are going to look like. Not really sure yet. We'll have some more of that to work out. But you can see we're still staying pretty loose, making sure we have everything blocked in the way it needs to be before we get to determined to do details. Okay, that's probably enough for right now, and I'll come back later and finish that out. Let's go ahead and draw some better looking lines down here. So again, for this, you just want to turn your smoothing up. 50 I found is a pretty good number to delay the pen enough to make it look kind of good. So this is a really easy way to get really smooth curves going without a lot of problems. And the more you practice, obviously, the easier it'll be to line stuff up. So you just want to try to get that going in a good, smooth direction. And practice, practice, practice. Okay, so then you'll come back in here and erase all of the stuff that is getting a little too messy in here. And eventually, when you have a good enough section of line art, you can go ahead and jump into painting some values like we did at the beginning of the stream. Hope you guys enjoyed tonight. I am going to wrap up at this point, and thank you guys again so much for joining me. I'll be back in again tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central Time, and we're going to be talking about how to start rigging in Blender. So it's not going to be a master's class or anything like that, but if you've never done any sort of rigging before and you're interested in learning how to do that, then tomorrow is going to be a great primer to get you into how that works. And so it's going to be a good introduction to how that is going to work for the dragon as well as other characters if you're interested in animation. So I hope you guys have a good night. I will see you guys tomorrow night again at 7 p.m. Until then, have fun and a happy blending.